So today we're going to tackle one of the biggest questions you can possibly ask. How will it all end? It's a question that pulls together everything from mind-bending physics to the oldest stories we've ever told.
Yeah, let's just dive right in. I mean, for as long as we've been able to look up at the night sky, we've wondered about the final chapter. Is there some grand finale already written into the laws of physics? Or could the story have a totally different kind of author?
Today we're going to explore two really powerful and really different kinds of stories that try to answer that question. You've got the predictions of modern science on one side, and then you have the deep, powerful narratives of ancient mythology on the other. All right, let's kick things off with the scientific visions. These scenarios use the language of things like general relativity and quantum mechanics to try and map out our cosmic fate. And honestly, they are absolutely mind-bending. For the longest time, the big debate was basically about these two opposite ideas, fire versus ice. Would the universe end in a blaze of glory, with a big crunch where gravity just yanks everything back together into one tiny point? Or would it end in ice, with this endless expansion called heat death, leading to a cold, dark, and unbelievably lonely void? It's an ending that really forces you to think about ultimate cosmic solitude. But here's the thing. More recent theories are suggesting the end might not be some slow fade or a gradual collapse. Nope. It could be something way more sudden and a whole lot more destructive. And what's really fascinating here is the engine behind these theories, something called phantom dark energy. Just think of it like a supercharged, out-of-control version of the Force that's already making our universe expand. If it's strong enough, it could cause a big rip, where that expansion gets so fast, so violent, it literally tears everything apart. Galaxies, stars, planets, right down to the atoms you're made of. The little rip and its little sibling are just slightly less terrifying variations on that same theme. But maybe, just maybe, the weirdest, most unsettling idea of all is something called false vacuum decay. This theory basically says our whole universe might be in a fragile, temporary state, a false vacuum. And if just one tiny part of it randomly flips into a more stable state, a true vacuum, it could set off a catastrophic chain reaction, ending, well, everything as we know it. And here's how it would go down. A bubble of this new, true reality just appears. It expands at the speed of light, and it just erases our universe. There would be zero warning. One moment, everything exists. The next, it's all been replaced by a new reality with totally different laws of physics. It's an idea that just shatters our sense of permanence, right? It suggests our entire existence could just be a cosmic accident waiting for a correction. So the scientific view gives us an end driven by these cold, completely indifferent forces. But that makes you wonder, are impersonal laws the only game in town? What if the end of the story is personal? What if it's driven by will, emotion, and conflict? Okay, so now let's pivot completely. We're turning to a mythological vision from Bengal, from these amazing epic poems called the Mongol Kavyas. Here, the end isn't about physics at all. It's about a dramatic, personal struggle between a mortal and a very powerful goddess. And right at the heart of this story is Manasa, the snake goddess. As this quote captures so well, she's a figure of incredible duality. She is life and death, healing and poison, all wrapped up in one. She's not some simple force for good or evil. She's far more complex than that. Now, the key thing to get here is that destruction is a direct result of a human choice. A merchant named Chand refuses to worship Manasa, so she unleashes her wrath on him. She takes apart his entire world, piece by piece. But this isn't a random cosmic event. It's a personal act of will, specifically designed to force him to recognize her power. This vision puts human actions and their consequences right at the center of the cosmic drama. But this story gives us a totally different way to think about what an ending even is. Manasa's power comes from snakes, right? And what do snakes do? They shed their skin. They symbolize not just the finality of death from venom, but also the promise of rebirth and renewal. And because of that, the epic doesn't end with Chand's world in ruins. No! It ends with his sons brought back to life and his fortune restored. But only after he finally accepts Manasa. The end, in this case, was really a transformation of the world's order, putting a new goddess up in the pantheon. It wasn't oblivion, it was change. So what do we learn when we put these two incredibly powerful visions, one from physics, one from poetry, right next to each other?
What do they really tell us about how we try to make sense of finality?
This slide really just nails the difference. Science imagines an end driven by these vast, impersonal forces, where the conclusion is absolute, and we are basically just spectators watching it all happen. Myth, on the other hand, sees an end driven by personal will, by anger, by ambition, where destruction is often just one part of a bigger cycle, and where our human actions like defiance or worship can have universe-altering consequences.
And really, it all boils down to this. These two ways of thinking are asking fundamentally different questions. Science is trying to figure out how it will all end, based on what we can observe about the universe. Myth is exploring why it might end, and what that means for how we're supposed to live our lives. One's a story about matter and energy, the other's a story about will and meaning.
And that brings us to one last question, a question for you to think about. Whether you see our end as a silent, cold fade into nothing, a violent cosmic rip, or a dramatic chapter in a divine story, how does that vision, whatever it is, shape your understanding of the time we have right here, right now?